Okay, I think we can possibly start now.
Are we good, Alex, to go?
I think we are.
Great, okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Postgraduate Certificate in Philosophy Information session. Before we start, we'd like to inform you that the session is being recorded and will be shared on the ICE YouTube channel, and the recording will be sent to all who registered for the event after the session. My name is Laura Chambers, and I'm the Head of Academic Centre Administration at the Institute of Continuing Education at the University of Cambridge, also known as ICE. Today in the panel, we have Dr. Alex Carter, our Academic Director for the Postgraduate Certificate in Philosophy, Henry Fernando, our Student Representative, Lucy and Kate from the Enrolment and Marketing team. May I have the next slide, please? The session will give the opportunity to find out more about our Masters at the Institute of Continuing Education. Course information sessions like this one covers each course in the portfolio will be taking place at 6:30 every evening, followed by a series of panel sessions with our students, academics and representatives. In addition to the live sessions, we also have a number of video resources on our website giving you further information on funding options, the application process, student support and interview preparation. If you missed any of the sessions or are unavailable to attend, you can watch the recordings, which will be available 24 hours after each event. Links to events and resources are shared in the chat with you and will also be sent via email after the session. Next slide, please. We'd like to tell you a little bit more about ICE. Established 150 years ago, we were the first university-led continuing education provider in the world. Today, we offer a wide range of courses to adult learners, including short, online and residential weekend courses, international summer programmes, and award-bearing part-time undergraduate and postgraduate qualifications, covering a number of subject areas from archaeology to genomic medicine. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, today in the panel we have myself, Laura Chambers, Head of Academic Centre Administration, Dr. Alex Carter, Academic Director, Henry, our Student Representative, Lucy and Kate from Enrolment and Marketing. Shortly, we will take you through what you can expect from the Postgraduate Certificate in Philosophy, including entry requirements, teaching style, module content and assessment. You will then hear from one of our current postgraduate students. At the end of the presentation, our enrolment team will take you through what kind of support we can provide for your during your application. We also have time reserved at the end of the session to answer your questions, so please do send the questions for any members of the team via the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen during the presentation. I'm very pleased to now hand you over to my colleague, Dr. Alex Carter, who is our Academic Director for the Postgraduate Certificate.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to quickly run you through the course content and basic structure of the postgraduate certificate. But I also want to talk about what I can't present here on a slide, which is what you're going to bring to the course as well. Because I think such an important part of the course is that you get to explore and try out philosophy in different aspects. So looking at different applications that you might have for your professional lives or just personal interest. So the first thing to say is that, roughly speaking, the course follows a kind of historical development in philosophy. So starting in the ancient world in Hellenistic philosophy, we look at ancient Greece, but increasingly as well, we're going to be looking at comparisons between Eastern and Western philosophy as well during this period. That will set you up to be thinking about two key themes, which I think carry on through the course, which are self and reason. And really, it's about the relationship between those two things and about also what philosophy is for, because it's meant to inform both of those things, but how do self and reason come together in the practice of philosophy? So philosophy as a way of life is very much the tone that gets set with the first unit. The second unit looks at Kant, and we look very specifically at one very narrow part of Kant. It's towards the end of his career, he wrote a very short piece attacking Neoplatonists. So there's already a connection there with the previous unit in the form of Platonism. But we also look at his reaction to British empiricism, and we also look at his influence on Hegel and the young Hegelians. which sets us up nicely for going into talking about Kierkegaard, who, as an existentialist, is responding to Hegel and Hegelians in a negative way, and returning us to discussions of subjectivity, but not in the way that Kant discussed them. So very much the self, or rather subjectivity, takes the central focus in Kierkegaard. And that rough arc of historical philosophical analysis embeds in those teaching weekends that we have with you. So you come to Madingley Hall for a weekend in each of those 3 terms, and you engage in discussions largely, but you're also sort of picking up from recorded lectures that have been recorded in advance, that you've hopefully watched in advance, readings that you'll have done in advance, so that those weekends can be chances for you to really engage with the texts, with the ideas, and discuss with your peers, with the academics, and just thinking more problematically about the content. So rather than it being presented to you as this is information, it now becomes something that you need to wrestle with to make sense of. That then feeds into the writing of your first assignment. And that first assignment is the longer assignment, and it's based on a question that we've set. But even within that question, there is flexibility to move around. So for instance, there are 3 different questions, not just that, but you can take them in a direction you want to go in. The real freedom comes, though, with the second assignment, and that's based on a one-to-one discussion that you have with me. I have the best role in the postgraduate certificate. I don't necessarily teach the weekends. I just come along and I have wonderful conversations with the students. But then I see each of the students one-to-one to talk about what they want to write about for their second assignment. And that is always so thrilling, because the topics that come up are things like post-truth and AI and genius and creativity and gender politics and all these different things that people want to get their teeth into and apply philosophy to. And also professional applications as well. We have quite a number of students who are interested in taking philosophy and applying it in their professional lives. So those second assignments are chances for you to really explore, and we encourage you to do this, and we encourage you to find a problem to address. So this isn't just about reading philosophy and some of the old-fashioned sort of philosophical views that you'll engage with, which have stood the test of time nonetheless, are ones that we can then grapple with and sort of drag into the 21st century. So that's where you kind of, each one of those 3 units is going to give you a chance to take ancient philosophy and bring it to the present, take modern philosophy, bring it to the present, take existentialism and apply it in the present. And each time you'll be doing this on what interests you. And even in our first supervision, sometimes I'm talking to students who are interested in a particular theme, for instance, AI, and we'll very quickly establish that there are 3 possible papers that they could write, one in unit 1, one in unit 2, and one in unit 3. So even just in the first supervision, sometimes we've already got a plan laid out for the entire year. So don't take my word for it. Listen to what the students have to say about this. Listen to what Henry has to say about this. He's just come out of a teaching weekend. It was the last weekend where we were talking about Kant. And students really loved it. They really loved talking to our academics. And on that note, let me talk a little bit about the academics. So if we can move to the next slide. The 3 units are taught by, next year will be taught by Johannes Wagner for Unit 1 in Hellenistic Philosophy, Cecilia, who has just taught the weekend just gone on Kantian philosophy, and Dan Watts will take you through Kierkegaardian philosophy. And those are the academics who, 2 out of 3 of those have been involved in the course since its inception, since 5 years ago when we first started running the course, but they've always brought new life to the course each year to bring in new content, new ideas. This last weekend, for instance, Cecilia was trying out some more active engagement with students around Kant based on feedback from previous years. And I think she opened with a discussion of how Kantian ethics informed policy when it came to responding to COVID. So really modern applications of philosophical ideas that we aren't thinking about, but people are already doing in the world. And we can then think about as philosophers and think, how would we do it differently? But that's basically the course in a nutshell. Looking forward to hearing your questions. So again, if anyone has any questions, please do put those in the Q&A. As I hand over.
Yeah, Alex, and hi, everyone. My name is Henry Fernando. I'm from Manila in the Philippines, and I'm currently a student in the Postgraduate Certificate of Philosophy program. This is actually my 3rd year at ICE. So I guess I would like to start my little sharing by talking about why I applied for this program in the first place. So my first 2 years were spent in the undergraduate certificate programs in philosophy. Those were also directed by Alex. So I've known Alex for almost 3 years now, and he's been the best mentor you could possibly ask for. You're going to get the best mentoring from him as well. The difference is that in the first 2 years under ICE, those were purely online programs. Of course, we were given a lot of videos to watch. We were given a lot of readings to engage with on an online platform called the VLE. And of course, we had synchronous sessions via Zoom once every 3 or 4 weeks, with the end result being, or the final output being, papers. But when I found out that the next step in my journey in ICE could possibly be the PG certificate, which I think is very important insofar as it has a face-to-face component and teaching weekends, I felt that it was a challenge for me to continue growing, and for me to actually be able to engage with classmates in a more personal and intensive environment, because it is intensive. So how did I apply? So, like in many other programs in ICE, you begin by applying online. I think what makes the application for the PG cert a bit more unique, right, is two things. Firstly, you will have to submit like a sample piece of writing. If I'm not mistaken, I remember submitting pieces that I actually wrote for my undergraduate certificate courses, not only because they were recent, but because I felt them to be very intellectually stimulating. And then the second requirement that you have to do as part of the application is an interview. Although this interview is done online via Zoom. I know that the interview can be daunting or intimidating for some. So let me say right off the bat that you don't have to be worried about anything at all. Uh, my interviewers were two of my teachers from my past years at ICE. The first was Alex Carter. The second was Dr. Milena Ivanova, who also teaches at ICE. And what I found to be surprising about the interview process was how personal and casual and intimate it was. Not only because I had already known them as teachers from the past 2 years, but because they were asking me questions that you would not expect a very big academic institution like Cambridge to necessarily ask. Of course, they asked some questions which you might expect, like what is your interest in the course? What are your goals? In which case I said, well, I'm interested in applying for even further studies after, maybe an MPhil in philosophy, for example. But eventually we segued into very personal questions about your views and your relationship with philosophy. For example, they asked me, how often do you read texts, or what was the last thing you read, or what other activities do you do in your life that have to do with philosophy? And I remember telling them that while I'm at the gym, I just listen to philosophy podcasts, and I think that kind of gave them an insight into the kind of student that I am. And if I were to give you advice on how to approach that interview, it's simply to be yourself, be genuine. They are not looking for any rigorous or very formal background in philosophy. And I'm here to tell you that most of the students in the PG cert right now, most of my classmates, have very little to no background in philosophy at all, and they got accepted. Why? Because philosophy as a discipline is not limited to students who have studied it formally in universities. When you ask questions about anything in the world, about what you do every day, your ways of life, about ethics, about how to treat other people, about COVID vaccines, at some level, you're eventually going to find yourself doing philosophy. So you don't have to over prepare for it, right? You simply have to explain what your interests are and what you want to get out of this course. But I'm not saying that you should under prepare for it either. You simply have to have an idea of what you're expecting from the program and what you can contribute, what you can bring, and also what the program can do for you. What do you plan to do with the PG cert? So this brings me to the second and more important part of my sharing, I guess, which is what is my current experience as a student. Well, I really love the PG cert. It's the best philosophy program I've ever been a part of. That's for sure. As I mentioned earlier, I'm from the Philippines. So a lot of my classmates, of course, they do come from England, but many of us come from a variety of other countries around the world as well. In my own clique, for example, in my friend group, one of us is from Mexico, two of us are from Switzerland, um, another one is from England as well. But of course, you also get an opportunity to interact with everyone, right? Not just during the actual sessions, but in between, when you have meals or when you have breaks or when you have afternoon tea together. I highly encourage you to be able to reach out and find opportunities to connect and network with everyone. Because when you have a group of people coming from such diverse backgrounds, you're able to get so many perspectives and so many different views on philosophical um, topics. So it is not at all a problem if you don't have any strict or formal background in philosophy. In many ways, it's a strength because when you come into the program uh, with very fresh expectations and very little philosophical baggage, which you might pick up after a few years of studying philosophy, you're able to give perspectives from different fields. And I think it's very important, and I know Alex will agree with this, it's very important for philosophy to have an interdisciplinary dimension as well. So if you have a background in engineering, a background in medicine, a background in business or finance like I do, that's perfectly fine. We're all going to find common ground to talk to everyone else. So before the actual teaching weekends, they also share a lot of readings which you can read at your own pace and time. There are also some videos at first that you can watch to help you get acquainted with the topic. But it's the teaching weekends themselves, of course, which are the highlight of the entire course, because that's when you're able to ask your questions and come face to face with your professor. In which case, as Alex mentioned, I just had my second teaching weekend with Professor Cecilia Muratori. She talked about Kant. I've studied Kant for a few years now, but I think I learned so much about Kant once more, so you can never learn enough. And it was just interacting with my classmates and my fellow students that really captured my imagination, and it just made me want to learn even more about philosophy in general. So one last point. One of the most important activities that you can do as a student to really maximize the opportunity that you will have as part of the PG Cert is the opportunity to engage in supervisions with Alex. I am not mincing words when I say that these supervisions, which Cambridge is so famous for, right? Supervisions and tutorials, they're going to spin your head around. You're going to enter a supervision thinking that you have a very clear and direct answer to a question. But there's a very large chance that you're going to come out of that supervision with a radically different view, a better view, something more refined, right? Philosophy does not dictate, or the program will not dictate how to think. The program is there to help you how to think, to help you flesh out your own views and flesh out your implicit beliefs and assumptions and values, and finally putting that in paper. So I'm going to end soon, but I would just like to end with the insight that this is probably or possibly the best program that you can join. So I do encourage you to apply. You learn so much more about philosophy and perhaps about life more broadly, because that's what philosophy is about. It's about clarifying our views about the world and giving us something to think about and helping us live in our day-to-day lives. So that's it. Back to Alex or Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Henry. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So the enrolments team can help you select the right course and provide advice on eligibility requirements in the application process. If you haven't yet placed a question in the chat, please scan the QR code. That will take you to the inquiry form, and from there you can put any questions to the enrolment team, or you can just email them via the email here, questions@ice.cam.ac.uk. I think we can now go to open the Q&A. So I think looking this, I've got one for Henry, if that's okay. How much interaction will I get with other students on the course outside of residential teaching?
Okay. My quick answer there is you will get a lot of interaction. So what a lot of students do is that we arrive in Cambridge on the Friday before the teaching weekend. So interactions can start as early as Friday afternoon or Friday evening, where you can already begin talking about what you thought about the topic, what you learned from the videos, what questions you might have remaining. Definitely you'll have the most interactions during the actual teaching weekend. You'll spend around, I think, 6 hours a day in a formal classroom setting. The sessions normally last from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. But there is a lot of interaction before and after, right? So you have breakfast together. Some of us are eating breakfast as early as 7:30, and we spend the next 2.5 hours until 10 just interacting with one another, which is why so many of us have become very close friends. Of course, you have dinners together, you have meals together, and at least for our little group, right? We're planning for our third and final teaching weekend in May to stay a few more days in Cambridge after the teaching weekend just to explore. That's going to be exciting. You can see where Wittgenstein and Russell lived and studied. You can see all of the famous philosophy-related sites, because Cambridge is one of the most interesting places in the world to just learn and live and breathe philosophy. Um, Even in between terms, it's very easy to find ways to connect with your friends. So you can form your own chat groups where you can actually pick each other's brains on the papers you're writing. I think that's very helpful. So there's as much interaction as you want there to be, and personally, I think there will be a lot.
Thank you
And
so much.
just to add to that, just to say that yes, email as well is an opportunity to share via email. The VLE also is an online platform for sharing ideas, and we have forums, but you can also message me. You can raise questions with the tutors as well. So we're always open and willing to respond to any queries students have as well.
Thank you, Alex. The next question is for you, I believe. Is there any specific experience I should have that would benefit my application onto the course?
Oh, good question. So the first thing to say, and I'm going to pick up another question as well, which relates to this, which I've noticed in the Q&A around having a scientific background as well. And just to say, so firstly, we take everything into account. This is continuing education. So you do not have to have a philosophy degree to do the postgraduate certificate in philosophy. Ideally, you will have a degree, but even there is flexibility. For instance, many of our students, like Henry, although Henry has degrees from elsewhere, but if you have come up through the undergraduate certificates, through the diplomas, through the advanced diplomas, that isn't a full degree. And indeed, sometimes students will go straight from the undergraduate certificate straight to the postgraduate certificate, or they will go from the advanced diploma to the postgraduate certificate. So you don't necessarily have to have a degree either. And some students as well will come with professional qualifications as well. So in terms of eligibility requirements, I would just say they are more flexible than they might appear. And we will always make a case for any student who we think will get on in the course. With regards to enhancing an application, I think to speak to Henry's point about the value of those weekends, I think one thing that's really important is to think about, possibly doing some weekend courses at ICE or somewhere, some short courses where you can show that you've studied philosophy and engaged with those ideas, so that when it comes to the interview, which is intended to be casual, as Henry said, and we ask you, what do you think about philosophy, or what have you engaged with in philosophy? You've got an answer which is, oh, I specifically attended this course and my thoughts on it are this. It shows that you can engage and think through a problem and not just take in learning, but also develop it and critique it and evaluate it and so on. So doing short courses can be very helpful, but just reading around the topic as well, because I realize also that implies a cost. And whereas reading philosophy, much of which is out of copyright, is free. You can go online and you can find texts by Kant and Descartes and Plato, and you can read them in your own time and have a think about them. I actually love YouTube. Not least because this video will end up on there itself, but also just because there are some excellent lectures by Alvin Plantinga, by Stephen Law, by me, by various other people talking about philosophical ideas. And again, you can get a lot of value from engaging with YouTube. And we recognize that many of the students who come to us have been inspired by something that they've encountered online because they were just bimbling around on the internet and found this very interesting thing and sort of followed that through to its logical conclusion. So in answer, read more and be interesting, which is good advice always when applying to any course at Cambridge or anywhere. Read more and be interesting. Yeah, that's what I would say would enhance an application.
Thank you, Alex. And possibly another one for you. Is there a path towards a full master's degree?
So we have many students who have gone on to do postgraduate study and full degrees and PhDs. I could list the various, so we've had students go on to do MPhils in Cambridge, both in philosophy, but also in divinity, where they do philosophy of religion, of course. There's classics. There's the history faculty have an intellectual history MPhil. There's the history and philosophy of science department as well, which is fantastic. It's set up for an interdisciplinary study of philosophy of science, of philosophy of medicine, of AI and creativity. So there's various departments around Cambridge. And I think one of the values of doing the PG Cert is you get introduced to that rather strange world where you might think, oh, I would just apply for a master's in philosophy. And maybe you should. And it's a wonderful thing to do. But there are other departments which you may not realize are offering master's degrees in philosophy. So it's worth doing the course on the one hand from the learning you get from the postgraduate certificate, which shows you can study at master's level in philosophy, but also learning more about the various different routes into other institutions as well. We've had various students go on to my alma mater, Essex University. We've had students go to Oxford, we've had students go to Harvard. So there are various different pathways that you can take. And my advice always with thinking about next steps after this course is find the people you want to work with and then find out where they are. Don't pick the place, pick the people. Find the people you want to study with and then look for the departments that they're based in. That's always the better way to go. And the chances are you'll end up working directly with people that you've read and been interested by. So.
Alex, sorry, another one for you. Are the dates for the weekends fixed?
Yes, I believe we have those dates. I don't have them immediately to hand. I don't know I think they are on the website. So if you go to the Postgraduate Certificate webpage and scroll down to each unit, I'm looking at it now and it's saying course dates 11th and 12th of October, the 31st of January and the 1st of February 2026, and the 9th and 10th of May. Those are the dates of the weekends. So they are set, they are booked, and yes, so you can know if there's any conflicts. I will also say some people have asked me, do I have to attend every single weekend? My advice is yes. In reality, not necessarily. Of course, we taught this course through COVID. We know that things get in the way, whether that's inability to catch a flight, whether it's I'm not well, whether it's having to cover for, to look after children or to be a carer. We know that things get in the way. I am going to say, though, I am amazed that we have currently 32 students on the postgraduate certificate, and every single one of them turned up at the weekend this weekend, which shows you that how much people want to do so. So again, if there are conflicts, we record them, we broadcast them on Zoom, so you can watch, you can engage live if you can do that from where you are, but you can also watch back the recorded weekend sessions as well. So we take into account that people's lives are complex, but we would encourage you to attend as many as possible. So if the dates conflict and you can't attend 2 out of 3, then maybe think about applying another year.
Thank you, Alex. Another question, I can answer this if that helps. As a postgraduate student, who would I reach out to for disability or welfare support? At ICE, we have our own student welfare team. So for any pastoral advice or disability guidance, you can actually contact them directly, or you can complete a secure welfare form and a colleague will contact you. We have support from the ADRC, which is the Disability Resource Centre at the University of Cambridge. So we're well equipped to help you. And another question for you, Alex. Please, what have previous students gone on to do after completing the course?
Ooh, so we've had a few students go on to do intellectual history. We had one student do film. He already had an interest in film, but he's gone on to do film at, he was at Corpus College, so he did an MPhil in film last year. We've had students go on to do philosophy of religion, specifically, or rather, a master's in divinity in the divinity faculty. That's just within Cambridge. We had a student go on to do a PhD in theology, or specifically looking at technology as a way of teaching children, engaging children in a kind of like Sunday school education using apps for that. And she studied that at Harvard. Where we've had a student go on to do philosophy and history of art at Essex. That was a master's student. If I'm struggling to think, I'm just because I'm thinking of specific students, but I know that we had a student go on to Sheffield to do an MA in political philosophy, and his work was around developing a new ethics for the NHS. And this is someone who could theoretically implement that ethics as well. So we've had students go on to all sorts of things. We've even had students who have so wished to stay with ICE that because we don't have a course that carries on beyond the postgraduate certificate, obviously there are other courses in Cambridge and elsewhere to do that, and we would encourage people to think about those progression routes. But some students have gone back a step and said, now I've actually had a taught course in philosophy, I wouldn't mind doing a bit of research in philosophy. So they've gone to see our advanced diploma course and undertake that. And we've had a number, I think 5 or 6 now, students who've done the postgraduate certificate go to do the advanced diploma researching one particular topic, topics like philosophy of humor, topics like ethics in finance. And we've even had some students go on to do the undergraduate certificate, not necessarily because they're looking for an academic challenge, although I think the material in the undergraduate certificate is pretty challenging. Is time real, for instance? That's a pretty challenging question. And yes, Henry is attesting with his nods there. He knows how hard some of the material is that we cover in the undergraduate certificate, but they were basically just wanting to learn more philosophy. And they could do it online. They now knew the teachers. They now knew that they could come to Cambridge when they wanted to, because that's the other thing as well, which we didn't mention before, which is that yes, you can contact your tutors and myself and other members of the team anytime, but you can also come to Cambridge anytime. And as a student of the University of Cambridge, you have a library card. You have access also to the faculty library, who have been very welcoming of our students to come and use the faculty library. So you can do all sorts of things in and around Cambridge as well. Just plan those trips. That's what I would say, and get those booked in as well.
Thank you, Alex. There's a question in the Q&A that says, would you share admission rates? Would you mind taking that one?
Sure. So we worked hard to get as many applicants into the current course as possible. That's why we have 32 students, although we have also some returning from intermission, which increased the number slightly. But we originally had a cap of 25 students, but we had about 50 applicants last year, and we had so many strong applicants, we had to start raising the cap as far as we could. We didn't want to raise it too high because we want to make sure that the class isn't too large so that people can keep discussing and talking through the problems, and that everyone gets a chance to speak. But we aim to get as many people into the course as possible. The other thing, though, to say is that there were probably people who would have got on in the course, but we will often say to them, it might be better if you do an undergraduate course first, so that you can get a little bit of grounding in it. And this is not to put off the person who said, I think it was the same questioner who said, I have a background in the sciences. By the way, I happen to think that scientists make fantastic philosophers because they have a real attention to technical detail. Definitions matter to scientists, specific terms matter. So when we use words like belief, someone who hasn't studied science might use that term as we normally use it in everyday life. But as a philosopher's using it, they use it as a technical term. And scientists get on with that very easily. So you'd think they would be a mile away, but they're not. They're very close. Actually, they're very closely aligned. And in my experience, scientists make excellent philosophers. But I also recognize that if you are coming in from a subject very far removed from writing critical essays, for instance, it might be helpful to get some practice in. So we had about 4 or 5 students, so about 10% of applicants who we said, we think you could do this course, but we recommend you do an undergraduate, or we strongly recommend you do an undergraduate course first. So we had more than, I would say, about 65% success rate of applicants, but that number is decreasing each year as the course becomes more and more popular. And we do get more applications each year, which is great. And maybe we can run 2 cohorts. So we will make a decision based on how many applicants we get. But the expectation is that you have a very good chance of getting on this course if you are a graduate, if you have some background in philosophy, and if you're willing to apply that background in philosophy and be challenging of yourself. And if you are coming to the course with that attitude, you've got a very good chance. But I don't know the exact percentages, sorry.
And another one for you, Alex. Would you mind explaining the difference between an MA and an MPhil, please?
Ooh, I'm going to do a terrible job of this. My understanding is an MA is taught, an MPhil is predominantly research. That means that an MPhil will have taught components, but it is really more about you're a researcher. And I would say in sort of more elite universities, an MPhil, there's an expectation you will continue. Whereas an MA is seen much more as a standalone course, whereas both are. So if you ever want to apply for an MPhil, don't think that that means you have to go on to do a doctorate, but it might mean that there is an expectation that they would consider you sort of moving your way through. And indeed, every doctorate, every PhD student is an MPhil student initially, and then they sort of pass their first year exam and they become a PhD student. But an MPhil can be a standalone, but there's a sort of expectation that you'll move on. I think also there's this recognition that it is in some ways more intense. There's a kind of greater seriousness around MPhils. And again, this is where I get into trouble by saying things like that, because it's probably not true. As someone who did an MA, I'm very happy with the standard that people set for MAs, but I think the MPhil standard, I think, would tax many people. But there are MSTs as well, which is a Master of Studies, which are part-time master's degrees, which again, you're now going to say, what's the difference between an MPhil part-time and an MST? My answer to that would be an MST is taught. And so again, the real distinction is between taught versus research, I think.
Thank you. And I think it's a final question. It might be for Alex and Henry. Are there any materials or books that I would need to purchase in order to complete the course?
Oh, I'll take that quickly, Henry, but you can please come in and correct me on anything if I'm wrong. But so Cambridge has a vast repository of e-resources. We also try and rely on more on online resources, because as Henry said, most students are trying to do the readings before they come for the weekends. Do students buy the books? Yes, many students do. Do they have to? No. And typically what we'll say is, if you live near a university, they will often give you borrowing rights as well. So there is an expectation that you should be able to make use of your university credentials to read all of the materials that you would need for this course. Henry, is that close to the truth?
Yeah, that's very close to the truth. I would like to share as well. Over last weekend, so we were discussing Kant. It wasn't required, but I saw a number of students bring in, well, someone brought in the actual text of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, which is very thick. Someone else brought their own supplementary materials, like a Kantian dictionary. Someone else brought Kant's Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals, even though that wasn't really a set text or required reading. So I think in general, students have an idea of the reading materials that they might need to purchase. But again, everything that you need is already supplied in the VLE anyway. But if you like to read and you want to have an actual physical copy in your hand, then nobody's stopping you. I would encourage you to do that, because I personally find it easier to engage with texts when I have something physical to hold. Over the weekend, our tutor Cecilia just informed us about the scan and deliver system, which it was my first time to learn about it. So the scan and deliver system, I think, is something which only universities like Cambridge and Oxford and Harvard have. But basically, each day, if you become a student of Cambridge, which you will be if you are accepted into the PG cert, you can actually request administrators for up to 5 texts per day. If you're building a bibliography, that is a lot, right? So they can scan it for you, they can send it to you, and basically, if you just say, I need this work by Kant, or I need this book, is it available? They can send it to you immediately. So more than the set texts, right? It's the vast amount of information that you will have at your disposal simply in virtue of being with the program. It's immense. That's another reason, I think, to consider joining. You will just have so much information and resources at your fingertips.
And speaking of that, Henry, thank you for reminding me. We have a philosophy resource page, which is accessible to all philosophy students at ICE. So this is undergraduate certificate students, undergraduate diploma students, advanced diploma students, and postgraduate certificate of philosophy students all have access to the philosophy resource page, where I have lectures on Wittgenstein as a Stoic, on Aristotle, on creativity as a virtue, various different materials out there. We've got recorded writing workshops that we've delivered in the past that students can review, and also just tips and tricks on philosophy. We also have partnered with the Royal Institute of Philosophy as well to provide their resources through our VLE. So they also have lectures, short videos with contemporary philosophers talking about topics that might be relevant to students. I've noticed that we have one more question that's just come in as well, which speaks to writing. Around the writing sample, because Henry mentioned that he sent in his own previous essays, which you are welcome to do. And that answers in some way the question that's being asked, which is, for option B of the writing sample, the writing on Kierkegaard, is there any advice on what is being sought? And the answer is, we're looking for evidence that you can write academically, critically, argumentatively. That's it. That's all I'm really, is this an argumentative academic piece of writing, or is it journalism? If it's journalism, by the way, that doesn't mean you're not in. It might just mean maybe you might want to do the undergraduate certificate first before you come onto the postgraduate certificate. But if you're writing in an academic way, and again, a historian could approach this question, they don't have to be experts in philosophy, but I did set the Kierkegaard question because it's a hard question. And I recognize that it's a hard question, but every year I get very interesting answers delivered to that question, which makes me think, oh, good, I'm going to keep that question as the set writing sample. So if you are thinking of doing that, please do write it. And again, don't judge yourself too harshly, because I will not be judging you harshly when you're writing that an answer to that question.
Thank you, Alex. We're actually coming to the end of our session today. I just want to say thank you to Alex and Henry and Lucy and Kate. We hope you found the session informative. We would love to hear your thoughts via our satisfaction survey, which will be emailed to you shortly, and we do hope to hear from you in the near future.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks, Henry. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.